Difficulty balancing is one of the key elements of good gameplay, and there are 100 different ideas of what balanced gameplay looks like. Let's discuss the merits of all kinds of ways to handle difficulty. When people refer to difficulty balancing or discuss whether or not a level is balanced, they're usually not implying that they think that difficulty should be a flat plane throughout the entire level. This type of balancing works for easy levels as they aren't meant to be very challenging, and changing the difficulty too much can make them annoying. When building a harder layout though, it's more common to have a progression of difficulty which changes throughout the level, whatever the creator wants that arc to look like. We'll talk about a few different styles of balancing in just a bit, but first, whichever one you choose, it's important to keep these two rules of thumb in mind. First, increase and decrease the difficulty gradually, rather than having it jump up and down every click. Not many players like a harder level that's carried by choke points. If you want a section of easy demon gameplay, for example, make every click gravitate towards that difficulty level, rather than say making 4 out of 5 clicks be 8-star and 1 out of 5 be hard demon. My second piece of advice is, when you do shift the gameplay in any direction, keep it reined in. You should have every part be in the same ballpark. Otherwise, the change is quite jarring and feels like playing two completely different levels. An example of this is to coop in circles. The crux of the demon is its middle part. The gameplay is easier before and after this. This type of balancing makes perfect sense, but the problem is that the difficulty isn't like this. It's like this. The beginning and ending are pretty entry-level extreme demon, but the drop gameplay is literally on the challenge list. The magnitude of this difficulty spike is what makes SAC unbalanced. If you keep your difficulty in the same league as everything else in the level and don't fill it with choke points, your gameplay will be much better for it. But the level of challenge is still probably going to change throughout the level, so how should you do that for a fun arc? The basic idea is to have it slowly increase throughout the level and build towards a climax somewhere between the middle and the end. Some people like levels that are harder at the beginning than in the second half. I don't understand why, but to each their own, I guess. When doing the aforementioned style, it doesn't matter where in the second half the crux is. I think it's best to have it near, but not at, the end, then finish the level off with a nerve-wracking section slightly easier than the hardest part in the pre-drop. Of course, the crest can go before or even after this, but if you choose the latter, keep in mind that this can be more frustrating. After all, would you rather die to 85% over and over, or 95? But difficulty over time should be more complicated than that. I mentioned pre-drops earlier and believe that drops are an important part of balancing. Most songs used in Geometry Dash levels have a drop, and are built around making use of it. If a demon isn't first half heavy, the pre-drop arc won't have gameplay nearly as difficult as the climax. The hardest part here might be the start of the build-up, and the level will turn auto towards the end. When the drop happens, I recommend not starting where you left off, but instead making the gameplay relatively easy before rapidly building towards the crest. This way, the player is guaranteed the satisfaction of drop gameplay the first time they get there, even if only for a few seconds. Another thing that's sometimes used is what I like to call the difficulty trough. This is when a creator includes a section that is noticeably easier than the gameplay immediately before and after it. Such a device is typically included for the sake of building tension. If you've watched my video Worst Parts in Robtop Levels, you'll know that I despise the one in Electrodynamics, stating that it utterly fails at being nerve-wracking. This doesn't mean that the idea of a difficulty break is always a bad idea, however. To see how to make them work, let's compare Electrodynamics to Theory of Everything 2. I have a lot of problems with TOE2, but I love its balancing, for the most part. The ways in which its difficulty trough is superior to the aforementioned one begin with preparation. In order to succeed with a break, you have to make the player feel like they've earned one, and the way to do this is to lead into it with difficult gameplay. Electrodynamics doesn't do this. Aside from maybe this ship, the first half feels like a harder level, and then Robtop turns it all the way down to 3 stars. This break is not earned. Theory of Everything 2, on the other hand, has 2 really hard ship sections before the break, instead of just having this sort of gameplay the whole way. This setup is the biggest reason why I always got nervous when I passed 70, no matter how many times I died to this ship part that came after, whereas in Electrodynamics I felt no tension until here. The ToE2 trough is also better handled in terms of length. The difference is only 5 seconds, but it's enough that it feels like a brief respite, while the one in Electro seems to drag on. I think the latter could have been made better at building tension if it was a little harder, conceivable that the player could die before reaching the difficult ship. But the fact that it isn't hard or short, in addition to the other factors involved, makes this part fail at stressing the player out. I hope these 2 examples can teach you how to make a good difficulty break in your Geometry Dash levels. So that concludes my thoughts on breaks, and with it, all of difficulty balancing in GD. Let me know what type of balancing you like and why in the comments, and consider subscribing for more commentary videos like this one. Thanks for watching!